Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. Listen live on air or online, wherever you get your podcasts, like iHeartRadio or many other places. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have as our guest, Dr. Kenneth Redcross. He is an MD and earned his degree from Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York. He is also an author of the book Bond, the Four Cornerstones of a Lasting and Caring Relationship with Your Doctor. On today's show, Dr. Redcross shares important information about blood sugar. When it's out of balance, you could face serious health risks, including diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and kidney disease. Having too much sugar in the blood, known as hyperglycemia or high blood glucose, is a health risk often associated with diabetes and other health issues. Dr. Redcross will discuss natural therapies and lifestyle choices that can help keep your blood sugar balanced. And to find Dr. Redcross, you can just go to drkenredcross.com. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Redcross.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Ellen. I always love connecting with you. So thanks for having me back.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in your practice, because I know you have a boutique practice where you visit with people one-on-one. How did our recent, all of us going through that pandemic, how did that impact your business?
It's amazing. Something that was already important to me, that doctor-patient relationship, which was just so much in my soul, became even more important during the COVID epidemic, when you couldn't go out and see your doctor and patients had to make very difficult decisions. And so that pandemic has changed so much, which is good, because I think now people are recognizing the importance of that connection with your doctor to make sure that you get the optimal health possible.
I also think that, while it's been a horrible, stressful time for so many people in so many ways, that the increased access to telehealth has actually been a very positive outcome.
It really and truly has. It's funny you say that, Ellen, because, as you know, my practice has really formulated a lot of house calls, and every so often it was more telephone. But because of the telemedicine that came out of it, I have a patient that I just spoke with out in the Basque region in Spain. I have another one that's in Quebec City in Canada. Those are things I don't think I thought so much about with practice, that I can actually touch the souls of people who are not necessarily here with me in the New York area. Right.
And then, with the video chatting, I think doctors can very often do a good diagnosis. Like if it's a rash, at least look at it. Yeah. And, you'll know if you can't do it and then say, no, you need to go to a dermatologist, or you could say, something. So I think it's been a big boon.
You're absolutely right there, because don't forget, so much of the diagnosis and the connection is listening. It's listening to the signs and the symptoms and putting together the puzzle there. And so that's the hard part with the medical profession now, is that you don't necessarily have so much time with the doctor for them to listen, to be able to properly diagnose. So you're right, with the telemedicine now, you can actually sit, there's no rush, and we can actually really tease through a lot of what's going on a little bit better than I could in the office when I was in that model.
Right. Well, you had to see, a patient every 8 minutes.
Yeah, and 7.5 minutes.
7.5. Oh, it's been cut back. And a lot of that time, I notice now that physicians who are unfortunately in that kind of commercial practice spend a lot of time just trying to look up codes, like they are in front of the computer instead of in front of the person.
Yeah, you're right. And those codes that Alan's talking about, everyone, we call them ICD codes. These are codes that we use to be able to bill. But it's not the importance of billing the patient at the moment when you're in the room. As far as I'm concerned, it's that connection and figuring out what brought you in and what we can do to get you on that healing path and journey. And so you're right. So much time is wasted on the administration and not as much focus on the patient where it should be.
Well, you have covered a lot of topics with us here, and your information is always so balanced. So today we wanted to talk about the whole concept of blood sugar, because most people know something like diabetes is linked to blood sugar, but it's not so easy about like just eating too many candy bars.
No, there's a lot that takes place. And the reason why this was so important is that we recognize that there's over 96 million people out there in the United States alone, Ellen, that don't even know that their blood sugar is elevated. And I thought it was the perfect time to make sure, even during the holiday seasons, when we have that October, November, December, whenever you're thinking of the holidays, we typically have sugary holidays when you think about it. And so when we're around those times, I figured it was incredibly important to at least make sure we're mindful that some of us are running around out there without knowledge of what our blood sugar actually is running.
So why is it that so many people are having issues with blood sugar? And I mean, even little children.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the things that we're seeing in the United States in particular is the obesity epidemic. That's a big part of it. Look, and you deal with blood sugar issues and other things. There is a little bit of a familial component, but obesity is incredibly important. It's a state that causes insulin resistance, meaning you'll have insulin circulating around and everyone. I think we recognize that insulin helps sugar be driven into the cells where it's supposed to be. But when you're having more weight, it makes it harder for your body to kind of know what to do with that insulin. So you have plenty of it circulating, but it just isn't waking up the cells to utilize it. So that's a big part of why we're seeing such a spike in America of blood sugar issues, for sure.
Well, is it only America, or like you said, you have clients? By the way, you said the Basque Country. I actually lived there for a while.
No, you did not.
I did.
You know
why? I lived there
gorgeous.
Because it's gorgeous. And those white cliffs in the mountains.
Yes.
There are people who live in those caves. And in particular, there are certain gypsies.
Yes,
I was studying belly dancing with those people.
Oh my gosh!
In who lived in those caves, so I got to stay there for quite a while and really got to know the culture. And I do speak Spanish, but they speak their own language.
Perfecto, exacto. Es muy diferente.
Yeah, a Basque, which is kind of half Portuguese. It was really interesting. So when you said that, I had a flashback.
Oh, nice. So nice. No, it's a very special place. And yes, and so everyone, as I talk about this obesity epidemic and this blood sugar, no. It's not just walled off here to America in particular. It's just that we are recognizing that we're having a bigger spike than some other countries until our diet is introduced, until that Western diet is introduced. And then all of a sudden, guess what? We start seeing some of the same challenges, whether it be the blood sugar that affects to create diabetes or whether it's heart attacks or strokes. We see the same issues and problems, Ellen. And so it's important for us to at least be able to wake up, to talk about some of the warning signs that some of you listening may have, and maybe create kind of a save here on the airways so you can learn and understand what could be possibly going on with your body.
That's great. So why don't you share a couple of those things that people might want to pay more attention about in terms of what they're experiencing?
Yeah. So look, everyone. So as we talk about some of these symptoms, let's recognize it's important that we're mentioning them now because they can be a little bit vague. But now I hope after hearing it, you're going to look a little bit further. So one of the first ones, Ellen, is fatigue. And you say, well, gosh, I'm tired. I work all day. We're all tired. We come home. So what is that fatigue? Well, fatigue associated with elevated blood sugar tends to be one that's around activities that you enjoy doing or around work, meaning you just don't have that drive to move forward. It's not like at the end of a hard day, you're just exhausted, you plop down and it's over. It's one of those things that just feels like, my body just isn't right. That's typically the way a lot of patients describe their fatigue. One of the other things too is increased urination. So why would we have increased urination when we have an elevated blood sugar? Well, that sugar gets to the bladder, and guess what? Your body has this process, just like water, it's osmosis, even outside the body. And so all of that fluid moves to the bladder because it wants to dilute all that sugar in your bladder. And so therefore, you have frequent urination. I always mention this in particular, Ellen, because my male patients will say, oh, doc, I just thought that was a prostate issue, and I just thought it wasn't a big deal. And so don't blow it off. These sort of symptoms that seem vague, but be mindful of them, because I promise these are things that if found early can make a huge, huge difference.
Well, even if it is the prostate issue, it would be a good idea to be speaking to a doctor about that and take steps to help it as well. So either way, that's a warning sign that you want to, keep track of. I have a question for you with your medical expertise. People may see these commercials on TV. I know I have seen it, and I don't know much about these kinds of glucose monitors that are sort of attached to someone's body, and people are saying they brought down their A1C because they had a better idea of what affects their blood sugar. What are those about?
Well, look, so those are something, and it's exciting in the blood sugar market because we're getting so much that's making it easier, right? We don't have patients that have to get pricked all the time, for a finger stick here and there. And now, like you said, we have some of those monitors that are making it a lot easier to find out, is my blood sugar where it should be? Unfortunately, Ellen, it's not easy for everyone to necessarily get those things. Insurance can be pretty challenging.
No, I don't really know. How do those work? Do they have to be, are they just taping on, or are they being, physically with a doctor put in permanently?
Yeah, exactly. It depends on which one. Sometimes they're just implanted under the skin as well. And then sometimes they're just kind of gauges and monitors that are in place as well. But once again, there's so many different ones. But the point is that they are now making it easier. And also, when I'm also happy that you brought that up, because it's letting people know, and I always say this, it's not your fault and it's not your fate. I always say it that way, Ellen, because when people have elevated blood sugar, they always feel like, oh, it's my fault. I made myself a diabetic. I ate too much candy as a kid and that sort of thing. But no, it's not your fault, and it doesn't have to be your fate. That's why we're talking about this sort of topic today.
Well, I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse at naturalnurse.com. And today, my guest is Dr. Ken Redcross, medical doctor. We're talking about blood sugar warning signs, but Dr. Redcross is available for all kinds of consults. You could find him at drkenredcross.com and also facebook.com and Instagram. You can find him all over. How do you keep up with all that stuff?
I just run around and make sure I focus on all of you, everyone listening. That's my passion. So I just keep running as long as I can.
Right. There's a lot to it. So with the blood sugar, so you're saying that these monitors, let's say they became something you could just get over the counter or for $100, something that people might be able to afford instead of some, I don't know what they're worth, but vast amounts that you have to get insurance approval for.
Yep.
It might actually be really good because from what they're saying, people have been able to bring down their A1C. And I'd like you to tell us more about what is A1C and why would you want to know yours.
Sure.
But if you are able to more easily know what triggers a raise, that's very motivational.
Yeah, it is. It's motivational and honestly life-saving. I mean, look, when we think about sugar, it's kind of fascinating, everyone, when you think about it. So sugar is such an important molecule in all of our lives. Sugar is not necessarily evil. What the key is that when you have too much of that sugar circulating, it can then become evil. But you need sugar in order to have energy each and every day. And so if you recognize that, you really have to step back, and really think about what is your relationship with sugar? How do you get the sugar in your diet? Are you adding it? Are you using artificial sweeteners, which is a big no to mention today? Are you using artificial sweeteners? Are you doing things that
Okay, wait a minute. I don't want to pass by that too quickly. I actually have at naturalnurse.com a full article anyone can look up on artificial sweeteners and how, I'd love you to share your perspective on them.
Yeah, so I'm glad you stopped me there because look, artificial sweeteners, everyone, think about it. Sweeteners were first created because we knew that sugar wasn't good for us and we thought this was going to be better. But now we've had some years and we've learned more. We're realizing that artificial sweeteners, not only are they really not better, but they also affect our microbiome. That important gut bacteria that we have that we know not only can help formulate how sugar is kind of modified in our gut, but also affect our immunity. So there's all these different studies coming out. Look, the two best forms of sugar that are all natural are going to be honey and maple syrup. Those are from the earth and from the creatures from the man above, right? They're all natural. And so those are the sugars that I use only if
Me
I want to
too.
utilize something. I do not touch artificial sugars. And I hope everyone out here listening will no longer touch artificial sugar. I mean, look, even when they did the studies, Ellen, it only took 2 packs. And you know how tiny those packs are, everyone. It only took 2 packs of those sugars to really affect the microbiome. And that's so important because there's also a brain health gut access
Well, wait a minute.
as
We're
well.
throwing things out that you and I know what we're talking about, but
Mhm,
let's tell
mhm.
people, what do you mean by the microbiome, Dr.
Okay.
Redcross?
So everyone, so we have this good bacteria that's in our gut. All day as we're walking around, there is this beautiful interplay with the good bacteria fighting the bad bacteria. And the point is to get a ton of good bacteria winning the right race. Why? Because that helps with inflammation. It helps with what I call dis-ease, right? And so we want that balance. We know there's some good things that balance it, whether it be kimchi, fermented foods, things of that nature that help to keep the good bacteria winning out. So the last thing you want to do is introduce anything that makes that balance detrimental or throws it off. So that's why I say when you're thinking of artificial sweeteners and other things that we put, artificial sweeteners, what is the biggest one in our food supply, everyone? It is soda. Soda is horrible for all of us, but that's where we're getting a lot of our artificial sweeteners as well. So I'm not talking about specific companies. I'm just saying sodas isn't something that you want to put into your like food source each and every day, especially when we're talking about artificial sweeteners and what it can do to your body.
And the worst offenders on that end would be where it says diet.
Yes. Oh gosh, which kills me again, Ellen, when I see someone in the morning drinking a Diet Coke. I'm just like, no, please. I just want to just say, can I respectfully take that out of your hands?
Snatch it out of their hands.
Adam? I try to be peaceful. I didn't want to snatch. I just respectfully ask. And then try to explain some of this. So look, as you're talking about all this, once again, everyone, what is this? This is a sugar story again, right? This is why we're talking about it. I'm talking about it for diabetes. I'm talking about the risk of stroke. I'm talking about the risk of heart attack. These are things that we can all control if we just recognize and understand our relationship with sugar and how we can balance that each and every day.
And also, when you talked about the genetics, a lot of people, I think they kind of use that as an excuse, but yet only 2%
Right.
of people who really get diagnosed with diabetes have a familial genetic connection.
Yes.
So that's very small amount of people. Now, I think the other people where even if it runs in your family, it often runs in your family because of dietary choices that are handed down through generations.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you said that because you're right. There is no way you can say, oh, it's in my family, so that's a reason. And once again, that's my fate. That's what it's going to be. No, I can't let you out that easy because we know that type 2 diabetes, guess what, everyone? We can treat that with weight loss most times. Something like simple weight loss and not a ton of weight loss, just something like 2 to 5%, whatever that is for everyone has a different BMI, I recognize. But the point is something that small can make a huge difference to kind of wake your body cells up to see that insulin circulating and say, oh my gosh, you're here. I know what to do with this sugar now. Something as simple as weight loss and some other things we can talk about.
Dr. Redcross, we got a listener send in a question, so I want to ask this to you. We were talking about the drinks and the diet drinks. What about the ones that are called zero, like they're called zero sugar?
Well, from what I understand, everyone, it's a little bit of let's just say it's a little bit of a trick still, right? Because when they say things that are zero, they're not zero as you and I know them as a real zero. That is just lots of times a reported value that can be called zero. So as confusing as that sounds, they can disguise that in a sugar alcohol, for instance, and not have to call it a full sugar. So once again, you have to look at your labels. And if you could, as Ellen and I just mentioned, the 2 natural sources of sugar that you can never go wrong with are honey and maple syrup.
What do you think of dates?
Dates are good as well. And also figs. I talk a lot about those two for the fiber that they provide. And once again, there's such a way to get that natural sugar from the fruit. That's where we should be getting most of our sugars. But be careful because too much fruit can also bring up some blood sugar. A lot of diabetics will tell you that as well. But once again, that's the way you want to get your juice, not from the carton, but you want to get it from the fruit.
Well, those are great suggestions. And of course, we're right here on Herbally Yours. And I know in your suggestions for helping to keep that blood sugar balanced, you do talk a lot about herbs, many of which have excellent science behind them in terms of being able to help stabilize blood sugar.
Yeah, this is the exciting part. Don't forget, everyone. So I'm a Western trained physician. And so for me to learn about some of these things that we did not learn in medical school that can help my patients in addition to a prescription, if ever needed, even though my goal is to avoid it, because right now we're talking about getting here without medication first. I talk about two in particular. Cinnamon is one. It's been around so long. I mean, so long, Ellen. Actually, cinnamon's mentioned in the Bible a few times. So it's been around a bit. Cinnamon is Greek word for sweet wood. And we all know the taste of cinnamon and the beautiful scent that we get from it. But it may be able to help support a healthy blood sugar as well as become an antioxidant and also an anti-inflammatory. The other wood that a lot of people know, everyone knows of cinnamon, it comes from a bark, is berberine, which is also from a bark. Berberine is fascinating to me because not only does it have a benefit with glucose I was going to say modification, but let's say glucose support, but also your cholesterol. And those are the things that are really affected when you have diabetes or when you have a heart attack or a stroke. Those two parameters, berberine helps to support. And so I like when there's science behind those things and how you get that and be able to bring that into your diet. Now, the tough part, Ellen, as it is with so many of the supplements, is that it's hard to get it naturally in your diet or enough of it. So this is something you're going to have to look into and really consider of how you supplement these things. How do you do it? Where do you get your sources? My go-to is always Healthy Directions because I know the company, I know the science. But once again, all of you out there, you need to have a relationship with those companies that you bring supplements or get your supplements from, introducing that into your body. So make sure that you know the source and that you understand what it is it's supposed to be doing for you.
And you give, really good examples of particular berberine, which I'll tell you is very bitter. I actually like the taste. It's golden color.
Yeah.
And it's in several medicinal kinds of plants like golden seal, barberry, Oregon grape, and philodendron. Some people may even have philodendron in their yard. So it does taste bitter, but if you get it in a capsule, like Dr. Redcross said, from a reliable source, then, it works wonders. And it's interesting because some companies will sell something, and if you read the label carefully on the front, it will say golden seal herb. And it'll be like this very reasonable price. If you know what golden seal usually costs, you go, what? But golden seal herb is the leaves, which does not contain berberine.
Right, exactly, Ellen. So with berberine, everyone, you need to have the bark or the roots in order to get the biggest benefit. And that was the other thing that was fascinating. When I mentioned Healthy Directions is where I like to tell people to get good supplements that are science studied. And when you look there, they have the right amount of berberine. It should be 1,500 milligrams, everyone. So when you look on Amazon, you look at those things, to your point, Ellen, you'll see these different extracts and this, a little bit below what the effective dose was in the studies. And so once again, it's back to that education of where you're getting your supplements and understanding what they're going to do. With berberine, you know that you're going to get some support for your glucose and for your lipids, that's your cholesterol. And why is that important? Because we don't want elevated cholesterol and elevated blood sugar when you think about the vessels, the blood vessels, the macro vessels, the big ones, everyone, that goes to our heart and our brain, or even the little ones that go to our eyes and to our kidneys. So that's why that's such an important story.
And I know you have, of course, lifestyle suggestions. People kind of do that as but it's probably the most important thing, like exercise.
Yeah. So look, this is fascinating. I love talking about food and so forth. I'm an avid athlete, so I'm always trying to get a one up on performance. And one of the things I talk about with exercise, the Mediterranean diet is the best diet in the world. I know everyone will call and say, well, Dr. Redcross, what about this diet? I'm going to tell you it's Mediterranean over and over. But What is one of the special things they do?
I just want to throw out that I really agree with you. I mean, over the years, when you get very extreme diets, like for instance, total raw food vegan, or for instance, total paleo, which is getting bigger now, especially carnivore, where you only eat meat and nothing else. So it's like, I think all of that is out of line.
It is, because look, once again, everyone, the homeostasis, this is what we're talking about with blood sugar today, right? How can we really achieve homeostasis? Because we said sugar is not evil. It's about the balance. And it's the same thing with the diets. And that's what the Mediterranean diet does. And one of the things they do in the Mediterranean after they eat, everyone, they get up and they walk. Why is that important? Well, because when they get up and walk, we know two things happen. Not only do they get a decrease in their blood sugar, good, but it also decreases their insulin resistance. So in other words, it wakes up the insulin. So the sugar is going where it's supposed to. That is probably an untold story of why that Mediterranean diet is extra good, because they typically get up 60 to 90 minutes after eating, and they get up and get moving for a little stroll. And the stroll doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be like when I'm doing my cycling or CrossFit for an hour and a half. It can honestly be 2 to 5 minutes and make a huge, huge difference in your life. Look, the studies show that if you get 150 minutes a week of exercise in, you could decrease your mortality by 33%. That's 20 minutes a day. So if you think about what that can do, that's cardiac, that's your sugar, that's everything for just 20 minutes of your time. It's incredibly important to make sure that's a part, especially if your blood sugar is elevated.
And it's really so enjoyable. I mean, to me, I also am an avid exerciser, and I do think there's a place where it becomes addictive. Only I think it's a good addiction to have.
Right.
In as if I don't do it in a day, I feel like, oh, something's really missing here.
That's the goal. If you can get to that, you know, and what better way to have an addiction that's as healthy as that? What addictions do you really know that's really healthy, everyone? Smoking isn't, drinking isn't. I mean, it's really exercise where you're going to get, you know, the best bang for your buck.
How about coffee, Dr. Redcross?
Oh, that's funny. You know, I will get my coffee drinkers who will definitely text me shortly after hearing this and ask me the same question. So I am a tea guy, but I'll say, okay, coffee and tea. But once again, even that's in moderation, everyone. Right. You know, we can't get too much.
No, I have like organic coffee once a day with filtered water, and I don't use a white filter. And I just, you know, the research seems to go back and forth one way or another, but mostly very positive.
Right. Yeah, it is. And the positive point when you go back and forth with coffee, we do know there's a cardiac benefit. There truly is. Now, the cardiac benefit is not there when we're drinking several cups a day. It's usually 1 to 2 cups. So if you get good coffee, good quality coffee, and get the benefit of the bean itself, you know, luckily coffee is something that can be a part of our food supply that could maybe be beneficial.
Well, thank you so much for being our wise and wonderful guest once again, Dr. Redcross. And people can find Dr. Redcross at his website, www.drkenredcross, just like it sounds, even though he's a doctor and it's corny that his last name is Redcross, but it is. So thank you so much for being our guest.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, everyone. Stay well, and please reach out, say hello, and ask any questions you may have.
And thank you for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.